Hello, my friends. Hello, my family. We are live. Welcome to Revolutionary Blackout Live. And I am joined with a great friend of the show. This should be a great conversation. We got a lot of amazing topics to talk about. I am joined with the executive editor of the Black Agenda Report. Always good to join and have a conversation with you, Margaret. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's good to be here, as always.
One thing that I've been discussing a lot. I had Q and I had his friend Hassan yesterday, and they was talking about their frustrations with the left in the United States and what they're getting wrong, and particularly, especially with Ukraine and on
hmm
foreign policy. And uh, you're one of the few people I've seen in the media sphere. A lot of our allies have been getting this issue correct. I covered last week about how when you compare it to like left leaders like Lula and a lot of socialists in the global South and in China and in Asia, way they are covering this issue is completely different than how like the standard Bernie Sanders. Like Lula went off on a tangent against NATO and blamed Zelensky for this war. Now compared to that to what a lot of progressives in the United States are saying, and it drives me crazy. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot
Yeah,
of issues there are a lot of issues that Lula have, but you see the difference between left leaders in other countries, what we have here. So I'm gonna start with this, Margaret. What do you think a lot of people are getting wrong about the Ukraine crisis? And what do you think the left focus should be on covering and discussing the conflict in Ukraine?
well, I think the first problem is that, what is left in the United States? There are really very few leftists. I mean, we,
That's a fair
we have
question.
this country that's so far to the right. Ordinary Democrats get to be considered on the left. And these progressives in Congress, they do nothing. I don't know what they believe or they think, but they don't challenge their leadership. And so they go along. They go along with everything. $40 billion to Ukraine. They all signed on. Not one person pushing back, raising a handful of people, but they were Republicans. So that's the first problem. What's a leftist in this country? The other problem I see, too many Americans, even those who claim to be on the left, still believe in American exceptionalism.
Yes. Yes.
And they want certain things to change. They want certain reforms, but the idea that America itself is at fault for this and for many other wrongs throughout the world is something they just don't want to hear. They want to think that the country's basically good, and if you change some things, things will be better. But when it comes to the kind of critique that's needed to talk about Ukraine, which Biden instigated. You may remember back in January, he said, and it seemed strange at the time, for weeks they've been saying Russia's going to invade, Russia's going to invade. And then he said, if it's a little incursion, it wouldn't be such a bad thing. And it seemed odd. It's like, is Joe confused again? But what he really was doing, and he often does this, is blurt out what most presidents would have sense enough to keep secret. They were instigating the Ukrainians to attack Donbass, to retake Crimea. And it was documented that these incidents were taking place, missiles and so forth. So they wanted to instigate something. They wanted to sanction Russia. They wanted to kill the Nord Stream 2 pipeline agreement between Russia and Germany. And this was their big plot to do it. But you have to be a real anti-imperialist to see that that's true, to understand how bad that is, to understand the role Russia plays in the world, and to believe that that countries have the right to their own sovereignty. All these attacks on Putin and Russia. First of all, let me just say, in general, whenever a foreign leader is demonized by the U.S., by politicians, by the corporate media, that ought to tell you something. It doesn't necessarily tell you anything about that person, but that person is being targeted and their country is being targeted. And Putin has been vilified more than any leader in my lifetime.
Yeah, they've been building this up for years. Russiagate was
Yep.
the necessary requirement for the Ukraine psyops, right?
Yes, sure was. And so what happens is Russia's so thoroughly demonized, only those people who really are well grounded in anti-imperialist thought and belief can see through this. What the United States wants, they want Russia to be the compliant nation it was in the 90s after the Soviet Union ended. And people talk about Russian oligarchs. Putin kicked the oligarchs out of politics. It was Yeltsin, his predecessor, who in the 90s let these oligarchs run the country, pillage the place, rob it blind, and that was fine. And Yeltsin was, he was Bill Clinton's buddy, and so
they talk about Russian oligarchs, but what is a Russian oligarch compared to an American billionaire? Like if you take Elon
Musk, same thing. Actually, we've got the worst oligarchs.
Yeah, exactly.
In the world are Americans. They control our political system. We don't get things we want. They decide who's going to take office. They decide all kinds of things. We don't get the
education. Like literally, the DeVosses and their cronies literally bought education. Just for an example. But you want to talk about Russian oligarchs?
Oh, look what's happening with houses. We have these hedge funds buying up houses. People can't find a house because they've been snapped up by hedge funds who are investing in rental properties. It's going to be another bubble that will burst. But so who are we to talk about oligarchs? But the country with the worst oligarchy in this particular crisis is Ukraine. Ukraine is completely run by oligarchs. Zelensky was put in office by one of them who was such a crook. The U.S. sanctioned him, a guy named Kolomoisky, who robbed his own bank, robbed in one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in history, stole so much money, he had to hide it all over the world, including in the United States.
Do you see this? So, this is what a lot of people don't talk about now. How Ukraine was considered one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Now Western media trying to pretend that's not the case. Pandora Papers reveal offshore holdings of Ukrainian president in his inner circle. And Ukraine had the most amount of public officials in the Pandora Papers as well. So a lot they don't talk about this stuff. Now it's sending $40 billion to Ukraine, and now there's reports that people have no idea where this money and where the weapons are going. So
the money is going to the U.S. military-industrial complex, and it's going to these same crooks in Ukraine. They are skimming money. They are selling some of these weapons on the dark web, whatever. I'm not quite sure what that is. But so all this talk of sending weapons to Ukraine, first of all, Russia is winning. They have done great damage to Ukraine's military, so much so that sending a weapons system at this point doesn't help any. These weapon systems are very sophisticated. It can't arrive today and you know how to use it tomorrow. You have to be trained. You have to have enough troops. You can't have guys getting killed every day. So it's all been a very big scam, and the levels of war propaganda have just been off the charts. And now they're trying to walk it back, but they lurch back and forth. So first, the New York Times, they tell you, well, Putin is evil and horrible, but they may have to negotiate. And then Biden's like, they may have to negotiate. Then they're pushing Zelensky under a bus. Well, Zelensky didn't listen to us, or they weren't honest with U.S. intelligence. Ukraine is a colony of the U.S. There's nothing that happens there the U.S. doesn't know about. And we have to talk about 2014 when the Obama administration aided the right wing in overthrowing the elected president. But after months now of shoving blue and yellow flags down our throats and having Zelensky on the Grammy Awards, now they have a problem. Because it's hard to walk all that back. And that's why there's so much censorship on social media. It's why they had this disinformation governance board, which they put on pause because they even screwed that up.
They're still going to do it, guys. Don't get it twisted.
Oh, they will. But I think Ukraine is the big reason they're talking about disinformation. They want to shut people up. Anyone who is going to say something that differs from the narrative.
Yeah, especially since the rise of independent media, even just podcasters that can debunk the narrative. They got more influence among like the key demo, like the 20 to 50 age group than like CNN, MSNBC, and like they're running January 6th marathons right now instead of covering economic problems and people, and they're wondering why no one watches their networks anymore, right?
Well, January. I have not watched any of the January 6th hearings. I'm not interested, and it's an effort to try to get the Democrats over the finish line. Hopefully, they won't lose the midterms too badly. They've screwed up everything. Biden was the biggest in my lifetime. I've never seen a president who told so many lies during his campaign. So they know what people want, but these oligarchs that we've been talking about, they didn't want to build back better. They were like, those stimulus programs, that was enough. Child tax credit, people don't need that more than a year. And they come up with this Putin's price hike, and they've been living on propaganda so long, and they did it with domestic policy. Biden's the most progressive president since FDR. Really? No, actually, no. But now it's petard as these things. Either he promised to do something about student loan debt, but he hasn't done anything at all. As an example, the child tax credit, they couldn't even keep baby formula. I mean, this shortage had been going on for months before they took any action. The minimum wage that didn't go up, all of those things that people need and people want, they're not doing it. So they hope to just say Trump at some opportune moment and have these hearings, and they think that will save them. But none of this is going to save Biden and the Democrats.
The strategy now is to tell poor people that things not as bad as they actually are. You're like, don't believe your wallet. Don't believe your empty stomach. Listen to us. Things are going great. And since we're on this topic, I'm gonna quickly ask you about this, and then we go back to Ukraine, because I've been avoiding the January 6th trials as well. But they had like this big political theater with Liz Cheney. She like leading it, and it's like just a disgusting show. And now this is like, a lot of people consider this guy progressive. We know he's full shit, right? He's a big progressive guy. And this is what his messaging, this is the messaging that comes out of the liberals after the January 6th theater now. This is what he says. Liz Cheney is a firm conservative, and I oppose many of her positions. Do you really? But she has demonstrated tremendous courage and integrity in face of the Trump's big lie. She is the breath of fresh air for the Republican Party. And he floats the idea of Liz Cheney for president.
See, this is the thing. And Nancy Pelosi does this. She'll say, we need a strong Republican Party. Why do you care if you're a Democrat, why do you care if they're strong or not? The real issue is she needs to cut deals with them. And if they're acting like wingnut maniacs, it's harder for her to get that job done. Robert Reich, there's just no excuse for him. I knew he was a wimpy liberal, but that's disgraceful to me. I'm sorry, it is. It really is. And but they're like, who? And if you're a Democrat, why do you care who's a breath of fresh air for the Republicans? You should be hoping they screw themselves. Why are you praising any of them? And this idea that she should run for, it's like, shouldn't you be thinking about who the Democratic presidential candidate ought to be, instead of taking this right winger and trying to turn her into a Democrat? It's disgraceful. And it's one more reason for people to just not to withdraw from the electoral political process, I believe, nationally. It's always vote blue no matter who, even if they don't do what you want, even if they act against your interests, you should vote for them anyway. And that's what it's come down to. Biden has lied about domestic policy. Every foreign policy issue has blown up in their faces. Every single one. They couldn't even withdraw from Afghanistan. It's like, you're just leaving town. You couldn't secure the airport and get the hell out. No, they messed that up. Ukraine, they instigated that. They're trying to start something with China. It's like, oh, you want something else to blow up in your face?
Did you see Biden's press secretary, where she got Bolsonaro confused with Venezuela? And that clip here, I want to show it to you guys. I haven't had a chance to show it on this network yet, but I want to bring this up because we talk about how deeply unserious and incompetent the Biden administration is. This video shows sums up. Let's watch it real quick, and I want to get your reaction.
President's meeting with President Bolsonaro of Brazil. The AP is reporting that the Brazilian government, President Bolsonaro, wanted concessions from the president for that meeting and for his attendance at the Summit of the Americas, that he wouldn't bring up. Bolsonaro is casting doubts about Brazil's election system, as well as environmental concerns in the Amazon. Can you confirm that report?
I cannot confirm that report. The president is looking forward to leaving tomorrow to head to the summit that we are hosting. I can say this: the United States continues to recognize Juan Guaido as the interim president of Venezuela. That said, while the interim government was not invited to participate in the main summit, they are welcome to participate in all 3 stakeholder forums and other events.
Well, what's funny to me, it wasn't clear to me if she confused the two of them or she was just so on message about Venezuela that she was like, okay, if anybody asks, because we have to go back a little, because the U.S. is the host country for the Summit of the Americas. That means it's still the Summit of the Americas. It's not the Summit of the host country. So Biden administration, instead of leaving it alone and letting Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaraguans leadership attend, which is what that was their responsibility as the host, they decide to exclude them. Talk about something that blew up in their faces.
Yes.
There were leaders who did not come. The Mexican president didn't come. A couple of Caribbean leaders didn't come.
I think Guatemala too, right?
What's that?
I think Guatemala as well. I'm trying to remember who else.
Yes, Guatemala, and I know it was a Central American country. One of the, I think it was Belize. Anyway, I'm sorry that I can't get it right. And the ones that did show up publicly criticized
Bolivia and Honduras. Bolivia, Honduras, the other 2 people, along with Guatemala and Mexico, that was boycotting the event as well. But sorry, Margaret, go ahead.
Okay, yes. So instead of leaving well enough alone, so leaders showed up and criticized the U.S. for excluding them, criticized the Organization of American States, an OAS, which is a joke. It's an absolute U.S. puppet organization. So they couldn't even get that right. But then, of course, it's like, well, do you invite Juan Guaido? So they're like afraid to invite him.
At first, they didn't want to, and then they was called out. I remember at first they didn't want to invite him, and then they was called out like, wait, if Juan Guaido is the interim president of Venezuela, why is he here? Which is a big oversight. You would think that they would consider. They're like, he will attend a few meetings and stuff. But anyways, go ahead. It's like,
well, but then they have a problem, because if you actually invite Guaido, then more people won't show up. Bolsonaro was using this mess to his advantage. He's like, maybe I won't show up either. And then he's like, okay, if I lose the election, could you help me have a coup or something like that? Because, they had gotten themselves into this mess. So it's kind of comical. I mean, sad, but actually we should not be sad that the U.S. fails in the world. Mistakes.
I've been greatly enjoying the story. Because it backfired from the very beginning, because by preventing Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua from joining the summit, that became the main thing that people was talking about, and they underestimated U.S. influence. So they didn't expect AMLO to come out and swing the giant baseball bat in the face of the United States. And ever since AMLO came out and criticized them, they also came out and AMLO criticized the United States for having a genocidal policy in Cuba. So now everyone was like, AMLO, why aren't you attending? Now his criticism was amplified. And there's so many things that made this backfire. And then other countries who did attend, then it was asked why they didn't boycott, like Mexico. And then that led them to criticize the United States. So you see how it's this endless loop of this Pandora box that they couldn't close. That's why I absolutely love this story. I'm going to share this headline. I want to get your thoughts as well. You can continue from there. But look at this. What's behind American decline? Domestic dysfunction. The Summit of Americas, hosted this year by Joe Biden, offers a measure on how the U.S. has fallen. And this coming from the Atlantic. And I saw a lot of mainstream media outlets saying the same thing. Like, yo, what is happening? What happened to America influence? And they are covering this story, and they're kind of decrying it. They saying it's like it's a bad thing. Meanwhile, we're covering this and we're laughing. It's a great time for us. But you see, even people to our right had to admit that this was a disaster, that this showed that
Of course it was. It should have been a lot of nice photo ops. I mean, it's the kind of thing the president should do very easily. All the, nations of the world are coming together. So you don't like Cuba, so you don't, have a little photo op with President Diaz-Canel. Okay, just leave it alone. But speaking of Venezuela, after all these years of sanctions, what happens when they, in their brilliance, and that was another problem with Ukraine, the sanctions against Russia have hurt the rest of the world far more than they've hurt Russia.
We're gonna get to that here soon.
This idea that Russia's just John McCain said, a gas station masquerading as a country. And last year, Biden says all he's got is nukes and oil wells. Well, they found out that's not true.
Yep.
And they've hurt hurt this country, hurt other countries with this sanction. And among other things, now they need oil. So after all this time, Venezuela is so evil. Juan Guaido is the real interim president. What do? They have to run to Venezuela to get some oil, and apparently eased sanctions enough to let Venezuela sell oil to the Europeans, who stupidly follow the U.S. like puppets and have shot themselves in the feet. So, so now Venezuela has to save the day for the U.S., but instead of just letting that go, and just in general, Biden foreign policy is Trump's foreign policy, except worse.
Yeah.
So they continue sanctions, but then need Venezuela's oil, but then think they have to keep these people from coming to the summit. I mean, it is awkward because the U.S. has accused President Maduro of Venezuela of being a narco trafficker. I think they even sanctioned his wife or something stupid. And the best thing to do is just get rid of all that, and you don't have to worry about it. Or something, but we're talking about that. And I want to say something else about Biden foreign policy. These people are not smart. They're just stupid. I know that it's ideological. I know they're trying to get the U.S. to dominate the rest of the world. And they don't know how. You can't do that. You cannot do that without causing great damage to the world or even a hot war. But these people are dumb. I mean, just to be blunt. Biden's entire foreign policy team should be fired, and he should fire himself. But that's the other issue. Biden's not a well man. He's a weak president. I mean, literally.
He's not calling none of the shots. None of the shots.
He's not. I don't know who is. I think someone said, and I think it's true, that Biden listens to the last person he talked to. But all the people surrounding him are these neocons who
Lloyd Austin whispering in his ear every day. Anthony Blinken whispering in his ear every day.
And they have no plan B. I mean, Biden was always a hawk as a senator, so I'm not surprised. But they have no plan B. They don't respect diplomacy at all. The only way out of Ukraine is to talk to Russia. But when Zelensky was ready to make concessions, what did they do? They sent Boris Johnson, the UK prime minister, the only Western leader dumber than Biden, and sent him over there to undercut Zelensky. So everybody who's been killed since then, frankly, the blood is on the hands of the US and the UK, because they were ready to give in somehow and stop the war, which is the solution to this crisis.
Yeah, they don't want it to end. Zelensky ran on a peace platform back in the day. Now he got stretched from Azov Battalion in the West, and not only the Azov. If Zelensky really decided to end this war,
he's toast.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I think the Pentagon will get his ass. But I want to show you guys something. I want to show you guys this video now, and then I will pass it right back to you, Margaret, because this is something that you mentioned before, how the West wanted to escalate this conflict, and this is Joe Biden's masterpiece, right? Something that he's been working on since he was a senator. So my good friend on Twitter shared this receipt. I'm sharing with you guys here. This is in 1997. Biden said he wants to provoke a rigorous and hostile reaction from Russia by expanding NATO. So I'm gonna mute my mic and then let's watch the video and I'm gonna show you guys how this was applied. And if you look at other foreign policy advisors from the 90s and Lyle Sanders, they said the same thing. If we expand NATO and we continue to escalate in the Ukraine, that will push Russia over the edge. This is the war that they always wanted. And like Margaret mentioned earlier, I'm gonna explain how this has been disastrous for the West. And now Russia economy is starting to rebound. Russia oil prices at an all-time high. So, like you said, Margaret, these people are idiots. So even their plan to weaken Russia has failed spectacularly. So let me mute my mic and now let's hear what Biden has to say. I'll get your thoughts, Margaret.
I think the one place where the greatest consternation would be caused in the short term for admission, having nothing to do with the merit and preparedness of the country to come in, would be to admit the Baltic states now in terms of NATO-Russian, U.S.-Russian relations. And if there was ever anything that was going to tip the balance, were it to be tipped in terms of a vigorous and hostile reaction, I don't mean military, in Russia, it would be that. So the way I look at the calculus here is
So now you have people repeating in like the most, it's very scary, like how propagandized people are and how loyal the media is to the U.S. empire. So then I know you know this as well, where they say they make sure they always add this part where they say it's unprovoked Putin's war. It's like they keep drilling that. It's a propaganda technique to say it's unprovoked over and over again. Despite that, all the experts knew that expansion of NATO into the Baltic states would lead to this. Now you got Finland and Sweden breaking their earlier contracts of neutrality with Russia to join NATO for no fucking reason because they already get security assurances as EU states. So, man, it seems like the world gone crazy, right? You have any reaction to that, Margaret?
Well, I think it's, that's just what the U.S. did. All the Warsaw Pact states that were allies of the Soviet Union are now members of NATO and the EU, and it's a little package that goes together, NATO and EU membership. And some of the former Soviet republics, like the Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and they wanted to get Ukraine in as well. And there was, in 2015, Ukraine signed an agreement with Russia, and Germany and France were supposed to be guarantors, the Minsk II agreements that would give the Donbass region some autonomy. Ukraine it's such a long, crazy story. So many historic grievances against the Soviet Union, against Russia. They were trying to ban the Russian language, which half of Ukraine speaks. So this was a peace treaty because the war actually, this is not the first time that there's warfare in Ukraine. Since for the past 8 years, the Donbass region, which is close to Russia and closely allied with Russia, has been under attack by Ukraine. So signing this agreement in 2015, but this is the third, obviously, that's Obama, Trump, Biden. No one took any action. They didn't want to do it. They wanted to provoke Russia. So this was an easy way to keep the peace, but they didn't even want to do that. And all Russia wanted these last few months before they call it a special military operation or invasion, whatever you want to call it. They wanted a guarantee that Ukraine was not going to enter NATO, and they wanted something on paper because Gorbachev, one of the biggest chumps in history in the 90s, he believed them when they said, "Oh no, we're not going to expand NATO," and took troops out of Eastern Germany and all what a dope. And they were like, "No, we're not doing that again. We need something on paper," but they rejected diplomacy. So they would send Blinken to talk to the Russians, and he just said, no. So Biden met Putin last year and then makes this joke about all they got is nukes and oil wells. They did the same thing with China. Xi Jinping said to them, he said, we have these nice talks, and then when the meeting's over, everything's the same. But I wanted, I just reminded myself of something. Shortly after Biden took office last year, they had this summit meeting with the high-level meeting, Blinken and Jake Sullivan, the national security nincompoop. They met the Chinese in Alaska and insulted them publicly, insulted them on camera. And I said to myself, well, this is stupid. I mean, it was like, it was like an omen of just how dumb they were, that they thought they could do this. And now they've instigated, they're trying to make Taiwan the new Ukraine. And China's like, we're not having it. This is a red line. Don't come over here. So, and I remember Biden being harmed. Anybody who didn't want to vote for Biden was told, well, you got to get rid of Trump, and it's harm reduction. And, these people who knew he was no good would like, well, he's harm reduction is going to be a little, but we've got World War III on the bingo card. So it's like, what harm reduction?
Yeah, they used to say, oh, we got to get rid of Trump because he's a maniac that's going to start World War III. Meanwhile, look at Anthony Blinken and Lloyd Austin running one of the most unhinged administrations I've ever and I'm glad that you bring up the fact that they're idiots, because obviously we know they're trying to enrich their friends. I think they're doing that. But if their strategy is to push full spectrum dominance, as we spoke about last time you was on here, if their goal is to expand American influence, they're doing the exact opposite. like their policies is directly leading to weakening the United States. What they did, they essentially created a giant discount market in China and India for oil. And that's why you see a lot of people in the West, they're like, we need to start investigating India for their human rights abuses. And now they're talking about Indian human rights abuses because they are not joining their crusade.
Let me tell you why that happened. India was buying oil from Iran, and the U.S. was sanctioning Iran. And the Trump administration, with their maximum pressure, they want everybody to sanction. That's why sanctions are so dangerous. The U.S. punishes nations that don't go along with their sanctions. So they convinced the Indians to stop buying oil from Iran. And what happened? China sneaked in and got this source of cheap oil that India used to get. So they were left with egg on their face and a loss of a cheaper source of oil. So having gone through that, this time they're like, don't buy Russian oil. And this time India's like, you know what? We're going to buy oil from wherever we want to buy it from. Thank you very much. But in their stupidity, now they want to sanction everybody who won't sanction Russia. These people have no plan B, I mean, and they even wheeled out Henry Kissinger about a month ago to
I think they grew up, especially in their political careers. The U.S. influence was so strong, and I love that you said they had no plan B. That's exactly it. I don't think they're used to, and they don't know how to respond to when they like, hey, country, do what we say, and then they're like, no, oh shit, we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do now.
Exactly. I mean, it's been 20 years of the U.S. invading, bombing, forever wars, and but they don't understand that they have created animosity around the world. So they go to the UN to, get these votes against Russia. And all these countries are like, we're going to abstain. That they don't want to risk saying no, but they abstain. And then they're like, oh, they're not against Russia like we are. Well, no, why should they be? Let me tell you something else that's happened. I mentioned how sanctions have hurt the rest of the world. I'll give you an example. The African Union chairman met with Putin last week. Why? Because Russia is a source of wheat for African countries, a source of fertilizer for African countries. So in their brilliant plan to sanction Russia, they kicked Russia out of the SWIFT system. And SWIFT is international financial transactions. So they kicked Russia out of SWIFT. So African countries can't pay Russia for the food they buy from them. So what happens? The African countries go to talk to Putin, so they're going to work out some kind of new financial transaction system.
Yes, and now they're going to be more independent from the West.
Exactly.
That's exactly what happened. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so everything the U.S. does undermines itself. Everything they do, they just undermine themselves further.
Hey, let me show you guys some receipts to show you guys what we are referring to. You see, this is. Well, and I'm showing you guys these mainstream media outlets for a reason, because even if they have to say it, just let you know, Russian oil revenue soared despite sanctions. Study finds rising oil prices more than offset a decline of export volume during the first 100 days of the assault on Ukraine. Here's another one for the economy. Russia's economy appears to be back on track. And now this is the point where, and there's reports that I was reading before the show of Biden administration officials leaking that they are like panicking because they didn't realize. Like, once again, go back to your point, Margaret. These people are fucking idiots. They didn't realize how much their economic war would backfire. And you've been mentioning how the U.S. been like mocking Russia's side. I remember Lindsey Graham in 2015. He was like, Russia has like the economy of the size of Spain. They had no idea the actual influence of the Russian economy. They were just so smug about it. And maybe they did really start believing their own farts. And now that led them down this path. Last thing I'm gonna share, and I'm gonna get your thoughts, Margaret. Oh, I lost my mouse. Here it is. And that leads to Biden and his administration scrambling. I don't have to play the video. I think a lot of you guys seen it. I'll just read what he said. President Biden, today's inflation reports confirmed that Americans already know Putin's price hike is hitting American heart. So let me translate for you guys. We started an economic war with Russia. We cannot win because we're fucking morons. You want to add anything to that, Margaret?
I mean, it's just funny to me. It's and they don't even know the most basic things about politics. I mean, the old saying, all politics are local, and it's the pocketbook issues that motivate people. I'm sure the propaganda has done its job, and the average American thinks that Putin is evil and eats babies or whatever. But that does not mean they are going to fall for this nonsense. That does not mean they believe this Putin's price hike. I mean, they're stuck in this bubble, and they think other people are going along, are going along with them. They're not. People can't put gas in their tank. I mean, it's it's not an issue I have, living in Manhattan and depending on public transportation, but people literally can't go to their jobs without being able to drive. They can't take their kids places. They can't buy food. And for them to just brush it off as, I will just say Putin's price hike 1,000,000 times. No. That's where the propaganda value ends, when people are hurting and they don't get that. So, to try to brush off the student loan, well, we'll give you $10,000 in student loan debt relief. I mean, if you went to, I don't know, community college and, it's small, okay, that might help you. I'm sure it'll help somebody. But people who went to law school or something, no, it doesn't do anything. It's a drop in the bucket.
And it defeats the entire purpose, because one of the reasons why studies show that canceling student loan debt would boost the economy, because you create a large spending base. So even people, if you're like a lawyer, if you're a nurse, if you're like if you're part of this high paying profession class, you literally the spending class that our society rely on to keep the economy rolling. So if we cancel all student loans for those people, that will boost the economy, right? But if you do a means tested student loans that really doesn't really give money to the spending base, it defeats the whole purpose, right? But go ahead, Margaret.
It does. And then the other thing that infuriates me about that, everybody bailed out the banks.
Yes.
Everybody bailed out the banks. Nobody means tested you to say, well, we're going to give the banks, they gave them everything they asked for. So all these people they claim to care about, why should the little guy bail out a rich doctor? Rich people don't have student loans. It's so stupid. I mean, the level of stupidity in this country is just astounding to me sometimes. Guys, but if you can bail out the banks, if you can give 60% of discretionary spending to the military industrial complex, then you can bail out people who wanted to improve their lives by going to college. But I think we forget sometimes that this is a feature of the system. We have a system that wants people to suffer, that wants people to live a precarious existence. They don't want people to do better. The entire goal of our oligarchic class is to punish people and add student loan debt, more than $1 trillion of it. There's it was like mortgage-backed securities. So you can invest in student loan debt. So it's hurting, the donor class who they all work for. So they're not interested in helping people. That's the last thing they want to do. And that's the hard and ugly truth.
Yeah. If you guys think the rich are taking student loans, think about it like this. if you're rich enough to pay for school, why will you take loans out that you pay interest on? that doesn't even make sense. That's why they don't do
No,
it.
it doesn't. It doesn't.
And I want to add, and I 100% agree with your theory that they want us to be beaten down. They want us to be overworked, stressed workers, right? Because the more being down, the more stressed, the more tired we are, the less time these being down and stressed workers will actually start questioning the narrative of the ruling class. The less likely they are to attend actions and protests. Like if you work 60 hours a week, are you going to be at a protest, a rally? You probably not, unless you're like a real soldier, right? And I actually discussed this on one of our education panels we was doing, and this is a theory I have. Like one of the reasons why I believe that teachers are treated so shitty, like teachers are constantly disrespected. I think they don't want teachers to be comfortable enough where they can actually do their profession in an inspiring way to kids, right? So they want teachers underpaid, they want them overworked, they want them stressed out. So when they go to the classroom, they don't have this beaming energy that can create critical thinkers. They just want them to go through the motions. There were studies that show that teachers, and because of COVID and the disrespect that they face, they quitting at an all-time rate. They stress more than ever. They criminally underpaid, especially when you compare them to police and people who commit violence on behalf of our government. That? So once again, that's just a theory. I don't have any hard evidence or studies pointing you guys to that. But I do think I think they beat down teachers so they don't so they won't be great educators, so they won't do a good job of educating kids, because the whole point of our education system is to create worker ants. So that's my theory. You have anything to add? And I can.
Well, the last thing they want is people with critical thinking skills. That's why the quality of education has declined so badly over the years. And that's why they created charter schools. It's union busting. It was, they don't want teaching to be a profession. They wanted, to have the same turnover as fast food restaurants, and plus somebody gets to make money with charter schools. So yeah, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. By the way, I was stuck on trying to remember the name of the Caribbean nation that boycotted Summit of the Americas, and it's St. Vincent and the Grenadines, tiny place in the Caribbean. But it was St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mexico, Bolivia, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Anyway. I missed that part. Thanks for bringing that up.
Anyway,
I want to share this. I also want to show the messaging that's coming from the liberal class and their blue check celebrities in response. Because now 2022 is coming up. Now they got to find a way to make their pitch to vote blue, right? But there's all-time inflation. Poor people are being hit left and right. The Biden administration, along with the entire oligarchy, don't get it wrong. I think it's the entire oligarchy's playing Biden just the figurehead of crashing the economy, right? But they got to get people to join their side so they can continue their class war against the working class. So look at this too. I kind of want to get your reaction to this. And this is also why they're having January 6th live stream events, right? Listen what this shit lib said. This has 90,000 likes. Now, we all know that Twitter is filled with fake shit libs. The report that came out showed that 50% of Biden's followers are fake. So let's apply that standard to this tweet. That's still 45,000 people if you assume 50% of those are fake. Now, listen to the tweet. I can't believe this would be a controversial statement, but it will be. Of course it will be. Inflation is not as big of a problem as the U.S. president trying to overthrow the results of an election and inciting an attack on the U.S. Capitol. Stop talking about the issues of poor people and economics. Focus on political theater.
Absolutely. I mean, Trump is all, they always need some boogeyman to run against. And in this case, the boogeyman was a president himself, but that's not going to cut it. It's not. And Trump could run again and win again. I don't know. Now they've already started shoving Biden under the bus. The New York Times is always like, oh, there's whispers that they don't want Biden to run again. That means the New York Times and their friends don't want him to run again. So the nominee will be somebody else. It won't be him. It can't be him.
But I don't think it matters. Like I don't think it really matters who they put up. They think they could probably pull this shuffle But I think you're right. I think Trump's gonna win. And guys, that sucks, man. I don't want to go through another
Doesn't
Trump
it?
president. I literally do not want to deal with Trump derangement syndrome again. I hated politics during the 4 years, guys. It was
I
so
know.
annoying. We're gonna have to go through that again. And that I'm
I
telling you,
know. It's like I can't. Well, I feel like I can't catch a break. So we had Obama, who you couldn't criticize. Then we had Trump, who you're supposed to hate, and there was Trump derangement, and that continues. They're using Trump all the time, and Trump should go to jail. And I know people like that. It's like, why isn't Trump in jail? I'm like, why do you care? Why do you care that he's not in jail?
Didn't they get mad when Trump used to say lock her up at Hillary? And then they were like, oh, Trump is advocating jailing political opponents. And now they literally went to jail anyone who had anything to do with Trump. Isn't that funny? So Trump just stole the whole class, right? But go ahead.
But but January 6th itself, it's like, it's not clear to me what they thought was going to happen. Was this just theater? Because Trump could be delusional. He's a nut too. That I don't know if he really thought that they would not certify the election if his little mega hat wearing minions ran into the Capitol. I don't know, or if he was just mad and he wanted to piss people off before he left. I don't know.
I think Trump is an idiot too. I think they didn't realize how much they was. This is my theory. I think they didn't realize how much they were riling people up. So Trump, he knew he was going to lose. So I think he was just saying stuff like, "Oh, the election is rigged," to save face. He was just trying to save face so he can run again. Like, no, I didn't really lose to Biden, man. But I think he didn't realize how much he would like get people seriously riled up. I think it was just a stunt, and they used it to raise like $250 million. So it was just a way.
They did.
I think it was a way for him just to grift his supporters. I think it was a political stunt that both sides wanted to happen because then liberals can fundraise on it. And I think they just miscalculated. I think, and I explained this many times on the show, January 6th was literally just the ruling class miscalculating, and they didn't understand it would get that rowdy at the Capitol. But there was no plan to. The democracy wasn't about to be overthrown. Like, you guys are people who say that stuff is fucking ridiculous. Look at other countries. Look at the coups that we have done. Look at the riots that we have started in other countries. And then when you look at January 6th from a worldwide view, it's a fucking joke. It was hilarious. Like, the entirety of Black Twitter was laughing at it. It's like, oh my God, a bunch of red.
Yeah, the only thing Black people were saying is, why aren't they getting shot? I remember that day. It's like, if it was Black people, they would have been shot. Why don't? And actually, someone was shot by a Black officer. It turned out, which was a supreme irony of the event. But but that's all of Trump's political career is miscalculation. He didn't think he was going to win. He didn't think he was going to get the Republican nomination. Yeah. And the Republican Party didn't think he was going to win. They came in at the last minute with money to save their House seats and Senate seats. But nobody thought including him, thought he was going to win. So then he goes out the way he came in with a lot of bluster, and people listened to him. And so it was kind of crazy. But it's nothing for anybody to be talking about. The way people are suffering, what Biden has done to the world, brought the world to the brink of war with major superpowers. Enough. I don't want to hear about. So I have not watched one second of the January 6th hearings. I'm not going to watch it. Yeah, and then I don't want to hear somebody like Robert Reich, praising Liz Cheney. It's like, oh, come on.
Man, I try to use the political circus to wake people up. Where I'm like, guys, just look how stupid this is. Do you guys really believe these are serious people? So that's all we can do is just laugh, mock, and try to drag people to more revolutionary thought. I have a few more receipts I want to share before we get you out of here.
Sure,
Margaret. So I want to show you guys once again, this is going on this ongoing theme of this episode, apparently, of the United States being dummies and don't understand what they're really doing. So we spent all this money for weapons for Ukraine, and now they are announcing they're going to send even more. Because 40 billion is not enough. I think like 40, out of 40 billion, like 10 billion was for weapons. So they're like, that's not enough. So now they expected to announce more weapons to Ukraine because Ukraine is like, quote unquote, blowing through ammunition. And that's the been report. They already used all the ammunition. They already used all the javelins. Guys, this shit is going to the black market. This shit has been unaccounted for.
Everything it's either been destroyed by the Russians or it's going to it's going to the black market. So it's money down a black hole, but it's money for the military industrial complex. Lest we forget, the defense secretary came straight from Raytheon to the Pentagon. They actually changed the rule, which required, I think, a couple of years to go by. But they changed the rule. And what does that tell you? That the Raytheon guy is the defense secretary. They changed the rules to get him in there. They have to get money for them. That's what that's about.
So there have been viral videos, especially in Russia, of Russian soldiers seizing the weapons that was sent to Ukraine. So, guys, our money has been thrown down the toilet. Now, this is the headline I saw the other day that I didn't see a lot of people report on, but it's hilarious. So, Russia destroyed the depot that was filled with a ton of weapons that Ukraine just got. So, guys, we're sending all these weapons to Ukraine, and these morons have no idea how they can't secure it. A lot of them don't know how to use it. There's a story I was going to report on where there were Ukrainian soldiers. They was Googling how to use javelins. Like, they had no training. Like, guys, it's a shit show down there. But once again, as we mentioned, they're not trying to win. They here to funnel weapons to dark oligarchs, the Ukrainian oligarchs, U.S. Friendly oligarchs, and their weapon defense contractors. So when you see stuff like this, when you see these Western weapons were destroyed in Russian targeted attacks, Raytheon and other weapon defense contractors, they already got their check for that. It doesn't matter if the Ukrainians know how to use the weapons. It doesn't matter if they're winning the war. It doesn't matter if Russia bombed the country. They already got their check. Once you view that issue in foreign policy as a whole, as United States intentions, everything starts to make more sense, right? I have one more quick headline I want to read, but go ahead, Margaret. You have anything you want to add to that?
No, it's like not only that, because the Ukrainians' casualties are so high, they're losing their non-commissioned officers, like the sergeants and so forth. The people who actually make an army run, they're losing people. So they don't even have the men to use the equipment that they don't even know how to use. They're getting reservists, guys in their 40s, to go to the front lines. It's shameful. All this stand with Ukraine, we care about Ukraine, and in the end, it was a joke. They want to fight to the last Ukrainian, and they don't care how many of them die.
Yeah, the funniest thing, the people they call Putin sympathizers and Russian sympathizers, we are the ones who actually want the best for Ukrainian people, the conflict to end.
How about that?
Is that funny?
How about that? I mean, that crazy country, which is full of Nazis, it is. Long history of collaboration during the war. The New York Times used to call the Azov Battalion neo-Nazis, and now they call them far right. And it's like, come on. All these people, I know you've seen these pictures of all these Ukrainians with swastika tattoos. And
yes.
So anyway, but still, we don't want them to die needlessly. I don't want them to die needlessly. And I'm guessing you do too. I follow these Telegram channels, and you can see, and it's like real. I mean, it's a kind of journalism, because all these soldiers have cell phones, dead bodies, headless bodies, charred bodies. So you can't see that stuff, which is being kept from the American people, by the way. They're always making up some BS about a high school kid, inventing a bomb to kill Russians, or the ghost of Kyiv, or some nonsense. But the reality is the Russians are methodically grinding their army down. And of course that means large casualties. But all these people who stand with Ukraine don't care. They never did. They were always using Ukraine to get at Russia. As Lloyd Austin said, our goal is to weaken Russia, which they haven't done. But
there are people who think being anti-war, you only gotta be anti-war if it achieves U.S. interest. They want this war to continue forever because they don't want Putin to get a geopolitical victory. So there's one last headline I want you to react to. It's slightly off topic, but I saw this study that came out today. So I just want to give you a reaction to this, and we begin to wrap up, because there's been a lot of discussion about how the United States handled the COVID response. And I think the COVID response is a great example of the failures of capitalism. And it's always hilarious when people try to make it about anything other than that. Like, it was obvious that the plan of the United States was to enrich big pharma as much as possible and to
Right.
gain state power during COVID. And you got a lot of these liberals who claim they're like, oh, we want to push mandates on people. We want to push all these restrictive policies because we care about you. That's why we're doing it. Guys, they did not give a fuck about people. Now, if you're one of the people that believe they care about people, a simple solution, if you wanted to protect people during this pandemic, was to support Medicare for all, right? So Joe Biden, Democrats and liberals claim, oh, we're going to handle the pandemic. We're going to save lives. But Joe Biden is literally helping jack up Medicare costs. He's waging a war against the elderly, and he's not even following basic campaign promises on healthcare. And the reason why I bring this up, I want to get your reaction to this, Margaret. This is a new study, and I'm probably going to report on it on another stream where I have more time to break this down. But universal healthcare could have saved more than 330,000 lives during COVID-19. So if, as far as I'm concerned, I don't want to hear shit about how, the right, they didn't care about COVID, but the Democrats, they did care about COVID. If you didn't support Medicare for all, you are the
Then
problem.
you didn't care.
But sorry, go ahead. I will look at your reaction. I just want to share this quick headline before we sign off.
Sure. Well, you know, the United States has one of the highest death rates from COVID of the so-called rich. I hate to hear about the country being called rich because it implies the people are prospering. But anyway, the so-called advanced capitalist countries, the U.S. has the worst death rate from COVID. And that's why. That's why. People had no protection. And who suffered the most? If you're in the managerial class, you got to work from home. All the frontline workers that people claim to love so much, they had to go to work. Then you don't have sick leave policy. People who got COVID, instead of staying home and being able to isolate themselves and take care of themselves and not spread it to other people, they couldn't do it. So what did the Biden administration do? They changed the recommendations when the airlines went to them to say, well, you don't have to isolate for 10 days. 5 days are good enough. So, and on top of that, yes, not having a universal healthcare system, it's been killing people. But COVID is one of those crises that brings all of those things to the forefront.
Yeah, remember during Trump, they used to talk about his death count all the time. They stopped, even notice how they stopped bringing up the death count under Biden too. I remember
more
when
deaths under Biden.
Yes, more death under Biden. And you know they don't bring that up anymore. They used to have on CNN, you would see the COVID death tracker under Donald Trump, completely gone under Biden. And I remember
when they reached 100,000 deaths, New York Times did this full thing, you know, front and bottom of the paper and pictures of the dead people. 100,000. When it got to 1 million, what did they have? Nothing, because their job is to protect Biden. That's how they see their job, not real journalism.
I don't know how people don't see it. That's a very damning fact. But I remember when they were repeating this stuff under Donald Trump, though, and I was like, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's his fault. That's the same reason I believe this is Biden's fault too. But I brought up how, remember the study that showed that 68,000 Americans die each year because Medicare for all will save them and they don't have health care. So I was like, all right, guys, if you guys are going to use this on COVID, why don't you guys do this on cancer? So if according to that study, 68,000 Americans die each year because they didn't have health care. So for every year that you president, while that stat is happening, why don't we have that death tracker for U.S. presidents before? Why not just under COVID? So that's the point I used to always bring up. But this is a study we definitely got to keep bringing up as a left. These Medicare for all studies, single payer studies, they always come up, and it's something that we got to educate people on, and we got to just drill it on. Everybody always like to cover it. So these conversations is always extremely fun when we have you on, Margaret. Any last words? Anything else you want to say regarding any topics, or anything else you want to promote before we sign off?
I'm so bad at promoting my book. It's a couple years old now. My amazing book, Prejudential: Black America and the Presidents. It's a great book. It's
check it out, guys.
A brisk read, as people say. I would say watch out for the censorship. People are being censored terribly. If you're on the left, you have to have a Telegram channel in addition to your Facebook and Twitter are censoring. Really, it's terrible. That's the thing that's of great concern to me, but we have to use these platforms as long as we are able. And I hate to use the word woke now. It's been misused, but stay woke. It's like, and just know when you see something in the New York Times and CNN and MSNBC, know that they're lying to you. Read Black Agenda Report. Black Agenda
Yeah,
Report.
make sure you guys check out Black Agenda Report. I read them all the time. They do a lot of great job
Yeah.
covering U.S. Imperialism. They're one of the few outlets that got the Ukraine crisis right almost immediately. So you're always gonna get great analysis at the Black Agenda Report. Y'all guys do great work over there, and it's always great to have the conversation. Thank you for coming on, and hope you guys enjoyed the show. I think CJ will be live tomorrow, and then JB and Savvy show is live every Thursday. I have a few guests I'm working on. I'm trying to get Danny Haifong on Saturday. We don't have a time yet, but we talk about censorship. He's one of the people that have been. Twitter took him down for debunking the U.S. narrative on China, and they're banning people with PayPal. I wanted to talk about it today, but we didn't have a lot of time. But that's something that we got to keep our eye on. Support independent media so we can continue to expose the U.S. empire. So thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share with friends if you guys enjoyed. And thank you for joining us as well, Margaret. Have a nice night, guys. Have a good one.